Welcome to Big Blend Radio's California Employment Law Podcast featuring San Diego attorney Ward Heinrichs. Hey everybody, we're super excited to have another fun podcast chat with Ward Heinrichs, and today we're getting into the legalese world. You know, we do this once in a while with Ward where he drops in and says, hey, do you really know the words that we're hearing about on TV? You hear about court cases, we watch true crime shows, you know, and even maybe going through our own legal issues in the world. And maybe really there's all these words. It's like that fine print when you buy a car or even sign up on an app. You're like, I don't care. I'm just going to sign on it. Oh, maybe you shouldn't. So legalese is important, isn't it, Ward? Welcome back.
It is important, believe me. And if for no other reason, it's important so that people can understand what these words really mean, because you do see them in print, and you probably have some preconceived notions about some of them, and maybe accurately, but a lot of them, I'm pretty sure that people have notions that aren't accurate. So it's good to clear it up that way. And then, right, you do see these in contracts, and it's good to know what that means.
Okay, so one of the terms, you've got some terms, litigation.
Yeah.
Okay, so litigation, that's interesting. We always think, oh, they're in litigation. Well, actually, what does that mean? Actually, I just see a bunch of people shuffling papers. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble right there. Well, no, I'm just going with what is the first thing that comes to my mind. And I should never be on a radio show or podcast about anything that comes to my mind. But litigation, is that the paperwork side? Is that actually in the courtroom? What exactly is that?
Well, it depends what you mean by paperwork. Paperwork is part of it. Litigation is the process of deciding a dispute through the court mechanism. So it's something that's filed in court. So there's paper there. And now, honestly, there's not much paper. Most of it's electronically filed, but it's the same thing. It's a document. And that is part of it, but also actually going to court. And again, that's changed too. So often we do it by Zoom or Teams or something now. But when there's a trial, you're definitely going in person. Now, I think they did have some during COVID that were done through Zoom, but I can't imagine trying to do that. It'd have to be a simple case. You really need to be there in front of a jury or a judge and presenting your case in the courtroom. And all of that is litigation. So what you're doing, litigation is the big process of resolving your dispute through court.
So this is an important part of everything. So the other part of this is the case action suit. This is case action suit. So not class action, case action.
Well,
so wait a minute. Let's go into that because
might not be clear the way I wrote it.
I'm not reading it. I just said case action suit. What is a class action suit versus a case action suit?
Well, okay. So let's start with case action suit. That was really three different terms that I linked with a hyphen. And I'm just saying it's all the same thing. Case, action, suit are often used interchangeably. And what they mean is your dispute that you brought in court for a hearing or in litigation. And so litigation is usually a lawsuit, and it's a bigger process. Now, you can end it anytime with a settlement or a dismissal or something like that. But you can also file a case and just have a hearing, like temporary restraining orders. It's you just file and say, hey, someone's been messing with my client. We want to get a temporary restraining order in place. And you go into court and have your hearing, and then the judge makes a ruling. So that's still a case. It's still an action, but it's really not a lawsuit. And suit really, suit is short for lawsuit. You're just getting the case or action decided through, again, it's a court process. It doesn't have to be litigation. That's why I brought that up. It could just be you're trying to get a temporary restraining order, and that's really not a lawsuit, and that's really not litigation. I mean, maybe it's a very small litigation, but it's a hearing. Um, so
Hmm.
all those are kind of related. That's why I put it that way. And we can talk
Okay,
about class
so
action
like
too if you want to.
in your world as an employment attorney, do you have like cease and desist orders and things like that that you have to do, like as like, hey, you need to stop doing this, like with an employee that's enraged at an employer or vice versa, where it could get weird? Do you have to do that kind of litigation?
Okay, now that's not litigation. All right.
Oh,
So if you've got a cease and desist order, that would be that would be an action. It would be maybe a case, uh, not a lawsuit. But normally, where we do cease and desist is just a letter from an attorney saying, "Stop this! You're violating the law. You're harming my client. Cut it out." So that's when you talk about cease and desist with me, I will write a letter to someone who's harming my client and say, "You've got to stop it. You're on shaky legal grounds." That's a cease and
oh,
desist letter. And you can get a cease and desist order, which I've never done. But that's
that means you do
different
good
thing.
letters. You do. So the letter is always the first thing. When you get the lawyer's letter, oh crap, I pushed that button one too many times. No matter who you are, you get that lawyer's letter. And okay, so the lawyer's letter, is it always the person that just you've been served? Or like, is that true? You see it in movies, like you've been served and someone just out of the blue, like skates up on a skateboard and hands you a letter and goes, "You've been served." You know, I'm like, "Where's my ice cream? I wanted that." But is that, I mean, so I love these legalese conversations so much because it just like leads us down rabbit holes. But you really, when you get a lawyer's letter, isn't it certified and all this kind of stuff? Or is it like just come in the mail? Then you can say, "I never saw it." Like,
Well, all right. So it depends on the situation. Sometimes we do certified mailing, and sometimes not. I mean, it's really hard for them to say they never got it,
wow.
and then if they didn't, who cares? We might just file the lawsuit anyway. So
Oh,
they're on pretty good notice. And normally, if I don't do it certified, I'll send it via email and mail it, and yeah, they know they got it. So it really depends on the situation.
wow. Okay.
You said you've been served. Now that's all cause that's a whole different situation. That's when someone. Usually, it's when you're starting your lawsuit and someone needs to get the summons and complaint. Maybe a TRO. You could get a TRO this way as well,
Which
and
is,
a temporary restraining order. So
can that
that's got
happen
to be
in
served.
employment law? I mean, can that
Oh
happen
yeah,
in
yeah, no, and you get
what?
temporary restraining orders in employment law sometimes. Um, there's some, there could be a problem at work where someone's either being stalked from the outside or there's one of your employees who's being maybe stalking someone on the inside, and
Dude.
you go, all right, you guys got to separate, and maybe if it's an employee, you might just terminate them. And it kind of depends how you're going to do that. And so when I've seen the TRO served in an employment context, usually it's an ex-employee who is not letting go of some relationship that's connected to the workplace. And then that ex-employee who will not let go gets a restraining order saying you can't be close to this person. In fact, you can't, and
Yeah.
again, depends on the situation. You can't even be within 100 yards of this office
Ooh,
place.
we've had that
So
happen.
I've
I've
worked
been
on
there.
those. I've worked on
I've been that. I did that musical organ world before we started our magazine back up here, and somebody got involved with somebody at a karaoke. Here we are back in the karaoke conversation. Karaoke, they dated, and next thing you know, they're getting stalked at the workplace. And all of us were like, "Can we go to our car at night?" Because it was after 9 o'clock at night. Are you being stalked? Does that mean we're all being stalked? And it was this one person. This woman was nuts. she was after this one guy. And yeah, he was hot looking. I worked with him, but like if she worked with him, she would realize like, no, you don't want it. But she wanted it. And she walked by the store in the mall over and it was freaky. And it disrupted
That would
business.
be a situation where the business could serve a TRO on temporary.
She suddenly disappeared. So something happened. It was like all of a sudden we all went to work and she was gone. And we're like, what happened to her? And then you kind of missed her because she was part of the process of you know what I mean? But this is interesting how we get there down these rabbit holes with legalese. I love it. I
Well,
love it.
and let me finish the idea on you've been served,
Okay.
because that's like you're starting your lawsuit. Could be a temporary restraining order kind of thing, or it could be a real lawsuit with a summons and complaint. And maybe they've had a hard time finding the defendant, so that can happen. And the service process agent has been looking around, and finally they get on their skateboard and they figure out, and this would cost a lot because they're doing a lot of work to figure out which person it is. They get on their skateboard and know that they're going to be, lunch at an outside cafe at 2 o'clock, drinking cappuccino. And they come up to them and they go, "You've been served." Now, normally like that, but they serve them. They'll find them and serve them, and that opens up the litigation.
Okay, see, I love these rabbit holes, but how does this happen where they just serve them and that guy is or girl that serves the person? How does that make it legal without, do they photograph them on their phone? Are they
No,
doing it in a
yeah.
public place? What makes it legal that it actually happened?
I mean, sometimes photographs are taken, but usually not, and they don't really need to. What they have to do is make sure it's the right person. And normally, what happens is they go up to a house, knock on the door, a business, and say, "Hey, I'm here. I need to see so and so." Or they may even ask the front desk operator, Can you accept service on behalf of this business?" And they may say yes. So there's usually questioning that goes first, and then they hand the documents over. And usually it's not like super confrontational. No one's happy to get served, but most people aren't going to get extremely upset about it. It's just the start of something. But that's how
Wow.
it is. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't really answer your question. Then they make an affidavit. They say, "I serve so and so at this place," and so they name the person that they actually gave the documents to. And either that's personal service. I don't want to get in the weeds on this. That's when you serve the party directly. Or it's substitute service. That means that you've given someone else the documents, but they're an occupant of in the same household or the same business location.
Dang.
And now I'm going to mail them a copy to do the substitute service. Two parts: service on someone else plus mailing. Um, but you
And
do have to
email.
gather information and put all that information on the affidavit and sign it. And then that's the proof of service. Or it's part of the proof of service. The affidavit supports proof of service. And then that's
So
filed
why
in court. And the court says,
why
"Okay, this party's in.
they
We're
they
ready to
did
go."
their due diligence, right? They did their due diligence, but they would the same document also be mailed? Or
If it's personal service, you don't have to mail it because you've given it to the person who is the defendant.
wow, this is like not the birthday greeting you want, right? Like, the person that
Yeah,
knocks on your door and
no one likes it.
happy birthday, here's a cake. And then it's like, no, you've been served. And you're like, caca.
Yeah. Now, I've never been involved with something that extreme where it's a cake and someone is the process server inside the cake, bursts out and says, "You've been served." That would be
No,
dramatic. That'd be cool, but I've never been a part of it. I've never even heard of it.
I know, no, no. I mean, some people have, like, you open the door and it's your birthday and you have that. But
Oh,
okay,
sure.
so yeah, yeah. So this is, I mean, it's fascinating to me about this because, part of why we do legalese is we watch movies and TV and all of this stuff, and how much do we really know? I mean,
There's a
this
lot
whole
to
thing,
it. The law
there
has
is.
such formal process, and most people never dealt with it. So, yeah.
I remember when Boston Legal was on and Nancy and I talking to you about Boston Legal, and you told us like, no, 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 half of that stuff doesn't exist. And
Um,
you irked us so much. You just irked is the kind word. Like, really, we love Boston Legal. I know it's
oh, it
hasn't
was a
been on
great
for
show.
years,
It was a
wasn't it?
great show. Yeah, I
And
liked it too.
God, what William Shatner just turned 93 a few days ago. Like, is that not
Unreal.
amazing?
That's
Isn't
unreal.
he not? I think he is an American treasure.
He's an
Honestly,
icon. I agree.
he is. I mean, can we all be like him? And he worked hard to get where he was. I mean, he slept in his car. He did all kinds of crazy things to get to being successful. And I think it's because he always did it. He always just, and still does, applies himself, right? I think that's important. So when you go into a legal situation, you must have an attorney that applies himself. And I would say connect with Ward, 1-800 Ward. You need to have a 1
Yes.
800 Ward, phone
Most of
number.
my clients really like me.
Well, they should, and I know you say you're aggressive. And you know what, Nancy and I were talking about you the other night about a legal situation for somebody. And we're like, dude, you need to call Ward, but you're not in the state. And we're like, we're both pissed off that you're just California. Why can't you be federal? Can you be federal? Is that such a thing? Actually, that's a good question.
Well, I practice in federal courts sometimes in California, but I only have a law license in California, so I can only practice in federal courts in California. So, no, there's really no such thing as having a federal license to practice in all federal courts throughout the United States. You have to be a member of the bar of this federal court sits.
So, in other words, you have to go get a license in every single 50 states if you want to do it.
If you want to do that, yeah, and
Oh,
no
that's
one does that.
crazy.
No one
Hell
does
no.
that. I know people
Hell.
have like 3 or 4 different bar cards, to 3 or 4 different
Mm.
states, but uh, that's a lot.
That's what Nancy and I are talking about. You do someone, and we're like, dude, like Ward is a badass. Like, I know he's so sweet on our shows, but we can tell like he's got this mind that like, and all your articles and like, no, like there's times we're just like, dude, where's Ward? Like, can you just expand a little, please?
Expand a little. Well,
Just expand.
I did expand during COVID, but I lost that weight, so that was a good thing.
No, I
I
don't mean that way. No, we don't want you to do that. I know you had a garden too. All right, so let's move on. So, cause of action. This is actually really an important term. Cause of action.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So,
It's another
oh,
word for cause of action is claim, and it's the legal. Um, let me. Why am I? It's not coming to me. It's the legal theory that you're going under to sue someone.
so it's like a motive on a criminal case.
Well, no.
Oh,
I mean,
see.
all right. So in let me see. Oh, all right. So if your employer isn't paying you overtime, then your cause of action is failure to pay overtime, and it's
Okay.
violates. So that's the cause, and um, there are specific elements that meet that you need to meet when you put on evidence to prove that cause of action.
Oh, this is perfect because to me, immediately I went to motive, right? It was what motivated this person to do this, in crime, because that's what we're all used to watching on TV. It's like crime TV and stuff. But, this cause or claim to action, you're going like, what is your claim to take action in court, right? Or to create a lawsuit or to say you need to stop. What is your cause? What is why? This is the why. And then then people call Ward and say, Ward, my employer yells at me every day. And Ward will go, so? No, 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 honestly, you have
I'll
to
ask
look
him,
and
well,
see, is it
why?
why?
Yeah,
Yeah,
why
what
is the
did you do?
wheel? Yeah,
No.
because yelling by itself usually isn't illegal, but depending on why the person's yelling, that could end up being.
Oh, and are they being, what is their word? What are they saying? So I mean,
Yeah, and
it
what they're
goes,
saying too. That's part of that. Sure.
yeah. I mean, if they're being derogatory to women or to anyone who is handicapped, that would be bad, right? Or of
Yeah.
color.
So if you have a handicapped person and you're saying you're fired because you're handicapped, well, that's a great disability claim. But if you're yelling at that person and maybe threatening to fire them because they're not doing their work, well, that would be legal. Now, there's also often very gray areas of what is happening and why it's happening. So that doesn't mean just because you say, well, I did it just because they're a horrible employee, that doesn't mean that it'll necessarily be believed by a jury
Oh,
or a
wow.
judge and kick it out of court. So, there's always two sides to a story. So the other side may say, well, no, not really. You were giving me a hard time about being disabled, 3 weeks ago, and now you're firing me. I think it's because I'm disabled. And
Mm.
it's really often those questions are very hard to answer and it's very murky and to make sense of it, and you don't know maybe who's wrong and who's right, and and as a jury you've got to make a decision. It's who do you believe, whose case is better.
Wow. Okay, so when things start to get into this litigation, as you talk about, and
Right.
um, the cause of action, and now things are starting to happen, you have the term counterclaim.
Ooh.
So is this when someone, like you could send a letter in, saying, "Hey, this is some bad stuff you're
Well,
doing,"
uh,
and then
yeah,
somebody
all right,
says
so that
no.
right,
Yeah.
so you might send a letter and say, hey, you wrongfully terminated my client, and also you failed to pay him overtime, and never he didn't ever get meal periods and rest periods and all that kind of thing. And those would be the claims that that person would file. So it wouldn't be a counterclaim yet. So they might go, all right, we can't settle this, I'm filing my case. So he files his case based on all those claims we just said, which is the legal
Oh.
grounds, failure to pay overtime, wrongful discharge, all those things we just mentioned. Now the defendant says, "Wait a second, I know that you're suing me for all these things, but guess what? I can sue you for something too because you defamed my character. You called
Ooh.
you said that I was sleeping with my secretary, and that's defamation, and it never happened. So I'm going to sue you for that. That's a counterclaim.
Ooh.
Defendant brings a claim.
Okay, so this is a whole other topic we have to cover on a show about
Okay.
defamation. Well, no,
Oh,
because it's,
defamation.
ooh, yeah, yeah. I told you about that one person that got fired, and the person fired him in a nonprofit, fired him by email and sent it to him and everybody in the company at the same time.
Ah, yeah.
That's kind of defamation in a way. Would that be a
Well,
defamation in a way? Or,
one of the elements of defamation is publication. So if you just say it to the person you're accusing, if you go, you slept with your secretary, that's not defamation because you're saying it to the person you're accusing. But if you
oh,
turn around and go outside and say it to other people, that's publication. And
oh,
that's one of the elements you have to meet. You can't, it has to be beyond just the two of you. It has to be spread.
ooh, social media is good for that.
Oh yeah, and magazines used to be really big on that. You'd hear about some of the big like Time getting sued because they defamed someone, and so if you publish in a magazine, lots of people are reading that. So then those cases are worth more because the defamation is so widespread.
Well, you better watch what you say on our show, our podcast,
Yeah,
or
you
since you end
better.
up in our magazines. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, everything's going to happen there. Okay, so I want to go to our next one. I love this list. We did counterclaim, but deposition. Okay, You know what? Because this is a term that we all hear in shows. It's, they've got a deposition, and we all go, he's got a deposition. She's got a deposition. We really don't know what the hell a deposition is. Who's got it? Who wants it? The dogs know. They go woof woof. They got a deposition.
No,
Like,
that's a little different.
no, no, you know what I mean. You when you watch TV and you
Oh
see,
yeah, they
true
talk about
crime or
deposition.
whatever, and you go, oh, they got a deposition. And the dog, that's why I say dogs know. We pets it. Dogs like to watch TV. I'm sorry, they do. And they will bark when things like this happen. The deposition word is a big word, but I can pretty much guarantee that maybe 70% of our country doesn't actually know exactly what it is. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that.
I'm going to guess you're right because that term often is used. I hear it in various crime dramas, and I don't think people really understand unless they've been through it. And of course, my clients often have been through it, so they know what a deposition is. But how many people have? How many people really know? And okay. It's usually part of a discovery process. So when
Mm.
you're in, and you can do depositions in criminal law, but it's really rare. It's usually in civil law. So you're saying I'm suing you for wrongful discharge. And then one of the things you do in discovery is send a deposition notice to the other side and saying, I want to depose your client. And that means
Oh,
you want them to go to some spot. Usually it's a lawyer's conference, or it could be any conference room, but often a lawyer's conference room. And a court reporter shows up and swears the witness that you've sent the deposition notice to, swears the witness in. So it's the same process that a witness who takes the stand in court goes through. You promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Yes. So the court reporter, who's also the deposition officer, does that, and then the opposing side gets to ask that person questions. And it's not always the opposing side. Sometimes the person who's being deposed has a lawyer who's also might ask questions. They're allowed to, but it's really about the opposing parties getting information from this witness or party to have it put under oath, put in
mm-hmm.
booklet format. And again, now it's mostly electronic, so it's a document that's all the testimony that witness gave that day, and it can be
Wow.
used in court as evidence. So that's the deposition. The deposition is where they come up, you've got a court reporter, they're sworn, and you get to ask them questions under oath, and now you've got a record of what they've said, and you can use that as evidence in a trial or a hearing.
Oh my gosh. So this is pretty big. And so it happens in person. So this is like a pre-trial in a way. Like it's before, like, is it like almost mediation where you could do this and it will save, maybe you don't go to court because of it.
Yeah, no, because depositions will often persuade one side or the other, or maybe not often, but yeah, often is probably a good word. One side or the other about how strong their case is. They may say, wow, that witness is really going to hurt us. Maybe we should just cut our losses
Sure.
now. And so
Yeah.
often the case can revolve around depositions.
Oh, wow. So you could say, okay, that's it. So that's what we see in TV when everybody gets in the room and they do this thing beforehand. And often happens with,
Well, all right, hold on.
I know.
What
Okay.
you often see is like a criminal defendant at the police station with a lawyer, and the police are asking them questions. And that's not a deposition. That's really an interrogation, but your lawyer happens to be there. And when the lawyer's not there, that's definitely an interrogation. And what's so crazy, that drives me crazy, because most lawyers would say, forget it. This ain't happening. You don't have the right. And he wants his lawyer. And once you say, I want my lawyer, they're supposed to stop asking questions.
Hmm.
Now, all right, so I'm going to get down a little bit of a rabbit hole. There was a time when I used to practice criminal law when I had a client who I knew was innocent, and the district attorney said, I want to talk to your client. And I said, well, what are you going to do for us? And they said, well, If it comes out okay, we'll dismiss her. And they ended up dismissing her. Um, and that's what they called, quote unquote, a free talk. And so that might be a good strategy in a criminal case sometimes, but there's risk to it. So you don't always want to do that. But that's not a deposition. A deposition has to have a court reporter there taking everything down, and it has to be under oath.
Wow. Okay. So this is cool because and then the interrogation thing, aren't like people that are arrested allowed to say, I'm not saying anything until my attorney is here. I'm not saying a word until that happens.
Yeah. In the TV shows, they call that lawyering up. And yeah, it's lawyering up. And then they're supposed to back off. And
what if you
hard,
don't have a lawyer? Then you're like, holy cow, what do I do?
No,
But
you can say,
you
I
have a
want
court
a lawyer.
appointed one.
Yeah, you can say, I want a lawyer now. I don't, I'm not talking anymore. I want a lawyer. And
I'm calling Ward.
Call me. Except
I
I
know.
don't do much criminal law. I have done a little criminal law since I started doing employment law over 20 years ago. Just sometimes cases might end up there for whatever reason.
Well, I mean,
I really don't do it very often.
Employment law and criminal law can touch hands. I mean,
sometimes.
Yep. I can tell you just even, with our company, we've had crime happen in it, and it's not us. It was, Nancy, and this is not in this country, years ago. I mean, 30 years ago. She hired someone who embezzled, and we had to go. That's crime.
That's crime. That's absolutely
That's crime and employment law, right? Does that happen? Do you have to cross hands with that, or what happens with you?
A client would probably call me about that and say, "Hey, what do I do?" And I might help them investigate. It just kind of depends what they really need. I might say, "Hey, report it to the police." It just kind of depends on what's going on. But
that was freaky, man. It was a close person too, and that was bad. Don't be too friendly with your employees. Just saying. Parties. Okay, just speaking of that. Parties. Apparently your party is not the same party Nancy and I like to have.
I don't think so. I think it's a little different in the legal world than the parties you have.
Well, and different than the political system, because that is not a party.
Yeah,
that's just a crazy.
I don't even know why they call it.
I just call that a poopy show, without saying anything that will get me into trouble. So no, we're not talking about political parties. We're talking about we're not having fun.
Yes. Parties are the people that are involved in a lawsuit, the named people. So it's either a plaintiff or a defendant. There can be other names to them, not necessarily plaintiff or defendant, depending on what type of process, specific process you're going through. But they're parties to the litigation is usually how it is. And so one would be the one who's bringing the claim, and the other would be the one who's trying to defend themselves against the claim. And those are the parties.
Mm. So those are the people. The parties are the people, or the actual entities. The entities.
Involved in the litigation, dispute resolution, whatever it is. Yes, they're the parties.
Now the pleadings. The pleadings. That just sounds so like. I don't like that word. It sounds whiny.
Well, remember, this came from England back in the old days, and so that's why some weird, some words that we don't use very often, or at least in the same way. Yes.
Pleadings.
Yeah, it really refers to the documents that are filed in a case and the initial documents. So in a civil lawsuit, you're talking about the complaint, and then usually an answer to the complaint. The defendant must respond to the complaint, or they could be defaulted. That's another good word. So they have to respond, and very often it's an answer. There's other ways to respond, but an answer is the most common way.
Wow. So the pleadings are like, hello, that's the communication.
It's the original formal communication. The complaint puts all the causes of action
So it is a big
The
whine, whine,
plaintiff,
whine. It's wah, wah, wah.
a little bit, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, that the plaintiff has against or says they have against the plaintiff. So all the causes of action, we already talked about that, listed in a document and spelled out all the elements in each cause of action. Um, and the idea is you're giving notice to the other side of what you're being accused of.
Okay. I'm going to go back to very old school. I know this is really like a dumb question for many, but I'm going to bring it back home. I'm allowed to. I'm blonde. Apparently, when I'm back east, I have dark hair, but when I'm in the Southwest, I have blonde hair. So anyway, I'm a blonde and I get to ask this question. I get to say that because I'm a blonde too, so I can make jokes about it. But
You're legally
defendant
blonde.
versus I am legally blonde. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Defendant versus plaintiff. Tell everybody the difference between the two. Who sues who?
Yeah, the
That's an
plaintiff.
important, I know we've touched on this before, but I always want to bring it back around to that because I think we hear, well, the plaintiff, the defendant, and I'm like, hello, am I the defendant? Am I the plaintiff? Who sued who?
The plaintiff is the one who says, I've been wronged by the defendant, and I'm going to file my complaint in court and put the defendant on notice, excuse me, of what they have done to me. And the defendant is the one who receives that notice and says, uh-oh, I don't think any of this is true, and I'm going to file my answer and then counterclaim that you're a liar.
Okay, so for people to remember this, the plaintiff says, wah, 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 pleading, and the defendant is the one who says, I defend this.
Yeah,
I think this
you're
is
defending
wrong.
yourself against the claims that
Yeah.
are made in the complaint.
The plaintiff starts the whining. The
Yes.
defendant says, you're wrong.
Yes.
I love these Legalese sessions, Ward. Thank you so much. Always fun. We can't wait for next month. I know we're going to be talking about small business in California, which is a huge deal. I know so much is happening with minimum wage, freelancers, Uber, Lyft. Who knows what's going on with that now? My gosh, fast food and how that is affecting restaurants. So we're going to be talking about a lot coming up next month. So everyone keep up with Ward at bestemploymentattorney.com, San Diego.com. Oh, did I mess up, Ward?
I was going to correct
you. Oh, he might have to be a plaintiff.
No.
No.
I'll get even some other.
bestemploymentattorney.san-diego.com is a website, and he is here every fourth Wednesday. Thank you so much, Ward. It's always fun, and you always keep us informed of what is going on, but also today, like actually understanding. And I think it's important. We're not all lawyers, and people start a business because they have a creative idea and, oh, let's go for it. Or people get into a career because they love this. They have a passion for something. And none of us think about the legal stuff, really want to. Some do. There's that percentage of us that we say, you guys rock, you're smart. And the rest of us go by our gut. And then we run into trouble and we go, oopsie. And then the trouble comes and then we don't understand what's going on. So the legalese segments to me are golden information to help people understand what's going on. Because really, if you don't understand what's going on around you and what's happening in your workplace, whether you're the employer or the employee, you're going to find out in a very hard way. And if you're in California, call Ward. So thanks, Ward.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's California Employment Law Podcast with San Diego attorney Ward Heinrichs. Keep up with Ward at bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com or follow him on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also subscribe to Big Blend Radio at bigblendradio.com.